is Mochamad Try Yulyanto, and I will be presenting my analysis on social safety nets and poverty reduction, macroeconomic policy challenges in Indonesia under the Prabowo administration. In this presentation, I will explore this issue from a macroeconomic perspective, focusing on both the challenges and policy direction moving forward. Start from the introduction. In this section, I will explain about role of social safety net itself, poverty reduction in Indonesia situation, and current emerging challenges. Let's start. So, over the past 40 years, 4 decades, Indonesia has come a long way in pulling its people out of poverty. A combination of consistent economic growth and broader social safety nets has driven much of this progress. By looking at the picture, the trajectory is clear. So, poverty rates across all three international thresholds, which is IPL, LMIC, and also UMIC, have been falling. The data is coming from the World Bank 2025. And if we see the international poverty line, the IPL, this line, the most stringent of the three benchmarks, tell a striking story. Roughly 85% of Indonesia live below it back in 1984, and by 2024, the picture had dropped to just 5.4%. In other words, extreme poverty in country has shrunk dramatically. This momentum held even after the poverty standard themselves were revised. Despite of the good progress, still not everything points in hopeful direction. Poverty and vulnerability remain stubborn realities for many, and economic headwinds aren't letting up. Inflation keeps climbing, global commodity price swing unpredictably, and tightening financial conditions worldwide put fragile gains under constant pressures. If we take a look on this picture as well, also hint at something worth paying attention to. Since around 2015, the speed of poverty reduction has quietly tapered off. It hasn't stalled, but the momentum that once defined Indonesia progress has clearly faded, and that slowdown matters more than it might appear at first glance. A large share of Indonesians are hovering just above the poverty threshold. Technically, they don't count as poor, but their footing is precarious, and it wouldn't take much. A job loss, a spike in food prices, a sudden illness to knock them back below the line. So it is high risk of falling back into poverty during shocks. Come into role of social safety nets. Based on previous explanation, with these pressures, the Indonesian government has leaned heavily on social safety nets as one of its main tools. Cash transfers, energy and food subsidies, health insurance, This program exists for a reason to give vulnerable households a buffer, keeping their income stable enough to cover the basics when times get hard. So, but none of it comes free. All of this initiative draw from the APBN, which quietly introduced another layer to the conversation, the question of fiscal sustainability. Beyond their social objective, social safety net programs also play a broader macroeconomic role, particularly in sustaining household consumption, which is the largest contributor to Indonesia GDP. As shown in this picture, the household consumption expenditure remains the highest among all components in 2024 based on the Badan Pusat Statistik data. If we take a look, this expenditure is about 54.04% of all total expenditure. In its development, Indonesia has also begun to undertake digital transformation within its social safety net system digitalization, enable more accurate targeting of beneficiaries through the use of a social registry, or we call it is DTKS, and integration with the national ID system. From a macroeconomic perspective, a digitized social assistance system enhances the government capacity to respond to economic shocks in a timely and targeted manner, thereby strengthening the role of social safety nets as an automatic stabilizer rather than merely a tool for poverty reduction. So, the next part will examine in greater depth the role of social safety nets as a crucial instrument in reducing poverty while also maintaining the economic stability. And also, I will explore the role of digital transformation for strengthening the performance of social safety nets. The next will be macroeconomic context before we deep dive more. So, in this section, I will explain the macroeconomic context of social safety nets. What is the correlation of the aggregate demand mechanism, and also the role social safety net as economic stabilizer, and what is the correlation of the digitalization and also the fiscal trade-off. So, the social safety nets play a critical role within Indonesia macroeconomic structure, particularly through their influence on household consumption, poverty dynamics, and also the economic resilience. As highlighted in the previous part, so despite significant progress in reducing poverty, a substantial portion of the population remains economically vulnerable. According to Badan Pusat Statistik data, as many 24.42% are in the vulnerable poor category. So it's called rentan miskin, yeah. So the translation of this percentage is 68 million people, yeah, in this area. This condition makes the stability of household income and consumption a central concern in maintaining overall economic performance, because we already discussed that the household is the uh, main output as well. Yeah, household consumption is the largest contributor to Indonesia GDP, yeah, accounting for more than half of total expenditure, like I said before. So, and if we see the consumption is the main driver of economic growth. According to the data from Statistic Indonesia, low-income households allocate more than half of their total expenditure. This is actually in accordance with Angel's law. So, if the lower income, so higher share spent on food, because the prioritization this category is on the basic needs here. Like one of them is food. If we see in the table, so the rural consumption is more on the food instead of the non-food. Yeah, it is about 56.85%. Given that lower income households tend to have a higher marginal propensity to consume, or MPC, any decline in their income is likely to result in an immediate contraction in aggregate demand. Yeah. So if we see this formula, consumptions constitute a major component of aggregate demand. Yeah. This one, the C, is belongs to consumption. This reduction translates into a reversal of the aggregate demand curve, potentially slowing economic growth and amplifying economic downturn. So, if the income for the low-income households is affect to the consumption downtrend, and the aggregate demand will be shift left, like in this picture, aggregate demand 1 into aggregate demand 2, and also the yield of the output GDP also looks the downtrend, and it is potential price decline as well. In this context, social safety nets function as a key mechanism to stabilize consumption. So, by providing income support through cash transfer, subsidy, and other form of assistance, this program help maintaining purchasing power among vulnerable households, particularly during periods of economic stress such as rising inflation or external shocks. Without such intervention, a decline in consumption among these groups could amplify economic downturns given their critical role in sustaining domestic demand. So, given before, it is the downturn of the aggregate demand, and it is one of role in social safety nets that government spending increasing during the turns with the social safety nets program. And like in this picture, so the reduced decline in aggregate demand will be moved to aggregate demand 3, or even more to the recovery position. It is support the economic stability and poverty prevention as well. So, what is the correlation in digitalization and also the fiscal trade-off? In recent years, digital transformation has emerged as a key enabler in enhancing the macroeconomic effectiveness of social safety nets. The we call this DTKS. Is belong to Data Terpadu Kesejahteraan Sosial with National Identification System, allows for more precise targeting and faster distribution of assistance. So, with the digitalization, from a macroeconomic perspective, This improves the government ability to respond to shock in a timely and efficient manner, strengthening the role of social safety nets as adaptive and responsive policy instruments. One example is the application of spatial machine learning to improve the accuracy of poverty targeting in Indonesia. Research has shown that the approach of the machine learning it can reduce the accuracy errors from 28% to 20%. However, while social safety nets provides important support to consumption and poverty reduction, their macroeconomic role must also be assessed in relation to fiscal sustainability. As these programs are financed through government expenditure, their expansion has implications for the fiscal balance and public debt. So it is the trade-off. This creates a trade-off between maintaining social protection, the adequate social protection, the budget, and ensuring of long-term macroeconomic stability. So it's not only given, but we need to think about the stability as well. The next part, I will explain about the challenge on the social safety nets with the correlation of poverty reduction and the macroeconomic concept. So we will start from the paradox of social safety nets. So even the expansive reach through social safety nets in the form of a social assistance program such as the PKH ya, program Keluarga Harapan and bantuan pangan non tunai or BPNT penerimaan bantuan iuran dan and the bantuan langsung tunai dana desa it is quite broad coverage across vulnerable groups. The question remained regarding the efficacy in producing sustainable welfare outcomes. The scholars have noted that the persistence of poverty reflects not merely resource scarcity but systemic weakness in policy design, implementation, and accountability. So we have the broad coverage, but we can see that we have limited impact on sustainable welfare outcomes. And also, they have the structural weakness in the policy design when the implementation in the field and also the accountability. So, consequently, Indonesia's social safety nets represent a paradox. Robust in structure but constrained in results, underscoring the need for critical assessment of its effectiveness within specific local contexts. And other than the social safety net itself to reducing the poverty and also the role of digital transformation also have the challenge. The digitalization offers significant potential to address some of this weakness, particularly in improving targeting as well as data-driven monitoring and evaluation. However, several challenges remain, including the digital divide across regions. Like Indonesia have some of the individual that low levels of digital literacy and the need to strengthen data protection and cybersecurity. In this regard, Indonesia's social assistance system still face limitation in generating sustainable welfare outcomes, highlighting the need for critical evaluation, especially in the context of policy priorities under the Prabowo administration. Additionally, several other specific issues can be outlined as follows. The first one of the primary challenges lies in the accuracy of beneficiary targeting. Although Indonesia has made progress through the use of data terpadu kesejahteraan sosial atau or we call this DTKS, limitation in data updating coverage and integration still lead to inclusion and exclusion errors. So prior to 2020, the exclusion and inclusion error rate for integrated social welfare data had reached 20%. And the impact is can the misallocation of resources and then reduce the policy effectiveness because of both on the inclusion or the exclusion error. Exclusion error formula can given that the eligible but not receiving per total of eligible population. So the the people, the family is should be receive the social safety net, but the data is not legible. It is the exclusion error. From a macroeconomic perspective, inaccurate targeting reduces the effectiveness of fiscal spending as resources are not optimally allocated to households with the highest marginal propensity to consume. So, because of inclusion or exclusion error, the targeting is wrong. So, let's say it is targeting to low income, but in the fact it is target to the high income households. So if it is wrong target and then wrong target to high income households, and then their behavior is more on saving, not to on the consumption. Yeah, so the consumption is moderate. But if we through the target low income household, it will be the consumption increase. So the consequence, it is on the weak multiplier effect, inefficient fiscal stimulus, and higher cost to achieve same outcomes. The expansion of social safety net programs, especially in response to inflationary pressure and policy priorities, has increased the fiscal burden on the government. Empirically, evidence show that social protection spending in Indonesia has increased significantly, rising for around 30%, 13% into 19% of the national budget during the COVID period. And the Menteri Keuangan has announced that government will increase the social protection budget by 8.6% year on year, and it is equal to 508 trillion. And also, according to the IMF fiscal monitor, on the 2023, general government expenditure in Indonesia hovered at around 17% of GDP. This creates a structural trade-off between short-term consumption support and also the long-term economic growth by the rising fiscal burden. While social safety nets aim to protect households from rising living costs, they may also influence inflation dynamics through demand side effect. Increased disposable income among low-income households who tend to spend a large portion of their income marginal propensity to consume. This can lead to higher demand for essential goods, particularly on the food. This is in the presence of supply constraint. This demand increase may contribute to additional price pressures as well. As a result, there is a potential policy interaction between fiscal expansion through social assistance and monetary tightening by Bank Indonesia. This highlights the importance of policy coordination to ensure that efforts to stabilize consumption don't unintentionally exacerbate inflation. So, other than the fiscal things. We need to think about the monetary and inflation, and we need to strong fiscal monetary coordination. Another structural challenge is the limited integration of social safety nets with long-term productivity enhancing policies. While these programs are effective in providing immediate income support, they don't always facilitate a transition towards sustainable income generation. Indonesia's social safety net system also face challenges in responding to dynamic economic conditions, including global commodity price volatility and tightening of financial condition. For example, the ongoing conflict between Iran and Israel could trigger an increase in oil price. Yeah, as previously mentioned, vulnerable households are highly sensitive to this shock, particularly through rising food price. While social assistance program provide a buffer, delays in data update or program adjustment can reduce their effectiveness during rapidly changing conditions. This highlights the need for a more adaptive and responsive system. We need real-time data so we be ready for any shock, for any conflict, for any commodity price changes. So if the data is real-time, we uh, can expedite our strategy to enhance the response as well. The next part will be the regulation and policy framework in Indonesia regarding the social safety nets. So, Indonesia's social protection system is underpinned by a range of regulatory frameworks, including the RPJMN or Rencana Pembangunan Jangka Menengah Nasional. So it is ruled by the Presidential Regulation number 12 of 2025, Presidential Instruction number 4 of 2022, also uh, one of the regulatory framework on the acceleration of extreme poverty eradication. These policies provide the institutional and strategic foundation for the implementation of social assistance programs, although challenges remain in terms of coordination and also the execution. Within this policy framework, Indonesia's social safety net system operates as part of broader macroeconomic policy architecture that integrates the fiscal policy instruments, monetary policy coordination, and also the multi-institutional implementation. As discussed in the previous part, the effectiveness of social safety nets depends not only on their scale but also on their alignment with broader macroeconomic objectives, including the consumption stability, the inflation control, and also the fiscal sustainability. So all of this need to sync. Within this macroeconomic framework, fiscal policy serves as the primary instrument for implementing social safety nets in Indonesia, particularly through government expenditure allocated in the APBN. Core programs such as conditional cash transfer or PKH, BPNT, and also the BLT and the health insurance are designed to protect vulnerable households and stabilize consumption. This program functions as targeted redistributive instrument aimed at households with a high marginal propensity to consume that we I already explained before, maintaining consumption among this group is critical for sustaining aggregate demand. Given the dominant role of household consumption in Indonesia GDP. In this context, social spending plays a key role not only in poverty alleviation but also in certain macroeconomic stabilization. In addition to targeted programs, Indonesia has historically relied on broader subsidy schema, particularly in energy like fuel and electricity as a form of social protection. However, such subsidies tend to be less efficient due to their universal nature, often resulting in leakage toward higher income groups. This reduces the overall effectiveness of fiscal spending and limits its redistributive impact. In the next part, this kind of need improvement will be discussed later. From a macroeconomic perspective, fiscal expansion through social safety nets plays a counter-cyclical role by supporting demand during economic downturns. However, as highlighted in a previous section, increasing social expenditure also places pressure on the fiscal balance, underscoring the importance of prioritization, targeting accuracy, and spending efficiency. The effectiveness of social safety nets is closely linked to monetary condition, particularly in the management of inflation and exchange rate stability by Bank Indonesia. Ya. Bank Indonesia plays a critical role in maintaining price stability through interest rate policy and liquidity management. However, this creates an important policy interaction while fiscal policy seeks to support consumption through social transfer. Monetary policy may need to tighten in response to inflationary pressures. This potential tension highlights the importance of policy coordination between fiscal authorities and the central bank. In this case, is Bank Indonesia. Effective alignment ensure that social safety nets can stabilize consumption without generating excessive inflationary risk. There be maintaining overall macroeconomic stability. So the strong policy coordination is really needed. So, how about the implementation and governance structure? Indonesia's social protection system is supported by a formal regulatory framework. It is based on the Law Number 13 of 2011 mandates that poverty alleviation efforts be implemented in an integrated and coordinated manner across multiple stakeholders, with the Ministry of Social Affairs responsible for managing beneficiary data. Furthermore, the Minister of Social Affairs Regulation Number 3 2021 established the Integrated Social Welfare Database, or yeah, DTKS, as main social registry, implementation and enforcement of the social assistance program. So the actor, the Kementerian Keuangan is responsible for fiscal planning and budget allocation, ensuring that social programs are financed within a national budget or APBN constraint. Ya. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Social Affairs, Kemensos, oversees program execution, including beneficiary identification, distribution of assistance, and monitoring. So, have a a good coordination between Menteri Keuangan, Kemensos is really needed, yeah, for implementation and governance structure. From yeah, I already mentioned before that we need to take a look about the fiscal fiscal sustainability as well. From a sustainability perspective, the effectiveness of social safety nets is closely tied to government revenue capacity. Taxation remains the primary source of funding for social assistance programs, making tax policy a critical component of the overall framework. So it is the poor targeting will be impact to revenue loss without impact, and it is will be impact to welfare support, and we need to see the fiscal sustainability. And the last part is a policy solution. So after I analyze the challenge within the macroeconomic concept and also the existing policy framework in Indonesia regarding the social safety nets and correlation of the poverty reduction. So we come to the policy solution, the effective social safety nets, the shifting of paradigm, and also the impact. Improving Indonesia's social safety nets isn't just about reaching more people. It's about making sure the right people are reached, that resources aren't wasted, and that the support actually leads somewhere meaningful in the long run. So it is really challenging and balancing about the short-term consumption support and also for the long-term macroeconomic sustainability. So when we reform the priorities, we need to combine the policy focus with the precision, the efficient, and long-term impact. So the first one that I propose regarding the improved targeting through the integrated data. So as I mentioned before, we have the current limitation about the data integration. The TKS are not fully updated and integrated. So one of the most persistent problems with social assistance program is making sure help actually reach the people who need it most, especially households that fall into that tricky vulnerable poor zone that mentioned in the part two. What Indonesia really needs is a living, a breathing social registry on that pulls together the TKS with tax records, employment data, and financial inclusion metrics to paint a fuller picture of who actually needs support. So my proposal is to have the dynamic integrity social registry with all of the data integration. What is the who is the benchmark of this kind of improvement? So Brazil Cadastro Unico is a good model here. It shows that smarter data integration leads to more responsive and accurate targeting, not just in theory, but in practice as well. So the impact will be to higher uh, fiscal efficiency, better poverty targeting, because we have more accurate data and also stronger consumption stabilization. So the the target is correct. Yeah. So the under Prabowo administration, we can say, for example, makan bergizi gratis or MBG is with the integrated data is large effectively and can be sustained, and we we can know the exactly people, exactly who you are serving. The second one It is the continuation for from the first improvement. The next step is pushing that momentum into how social assistance is actually delivered. If we already have the accurate data within the good technology implementation, connecting digital ID system, banking infrastructure, and also e-wallet platform, so that transfer can reach people directly. It is enable direct and faster transfer, reduce leakage, and higher transparency because all of the transaction, all of the activity is recorded in the database, so we can track it easily. With the benchmark of this, the direct benefit transfer is owned by India system. Is a good reference point here. It's shown in a fairly convincing way that going digital doesn't just speed things up, it also cuts down on leakage and make the whole process more transparent. So for the impact, it can be faster respond during economic shock and also stronger automatic stabilizer. So it is really impactful, I think, with expand through the digital system. Even under Prabowo administration, social programs are getting bigger and more ambitious. Thus, qualities are optional; they are very essential. So we need to have the correct data, and also we need to enhance how can we deliver to the right people. The next one, after we have good data, correct data, and also we can enhance through the our technology. So Indonesia will be better served by gradually shifting how that money is spent, rather than continue to pour funds into broad energy subsidies that benefit everyone regardless of income. The focus should move toward assistance that actual reach those who need it most. This isn't a radical idea. So Iran have gone down this road before, sweeping out blanket subsidies for direct cash transfer to low-income households. Yeah, the results were largely positive. Government spent smarter, and vulnerable people didn't get left behind in the process. So it is can reduce as well and improve uh, the fiscal space for invest long term in education, healthcare, and also the infrastructure. And also, it can be trimming wasteful spending and also reduce leakage. And we identified the current gap is weak linkage to productivity, fostering dependency rather than helping people stand on their own feet. So to fix isn't to cut support, it's to make the support work harder. That means tying social safety nets more closely to programs that give people actual skill and opportunity, vocational training, job placement, small business support, and yeah, something like that will be reduce dependency risk, to improve human capital, and also support inclusive growth. We can benchmark for the Brazil with Bolsa Familia rather than simply handing out case. The program attached condition kids had to stay in school, family had to engage the healthcare service. The result wasn't just short term, so it was a measurable improvement in how the next generation developed. It's a model worth paying attention to. And I think it is unintentionally this direction lines up well with the Prabowo administration as well. Initiatives like MBG reflect the recognition that investing in nutrition and child development today pays dividends down the road. That's the right instinct. The next one, spending more on social program doesn't automatically mean spending better. So we need to think about distinction matters enormously, especially when fiscal pressure are real and resources are finite. This is particularly pressing right now. The Prabowo administration has moved ambitious on expanding social program, and ambition is fine, but ambition without fiscal discipline is a recipe for trouble down the line. The more commitment a government makes, the more carefully it needs to manage the books. Other countries have found workable solution here, and the impact is can be maintain fiscal stability and preserve investor confidence as well to us. So we need to improve the technology. We need to improve our human capital. We need to improve our strategy and strengthen the fiscal discipline. And last but not least, we need to faster respond to economic shocks. Yeah. So Indonesia, we doesn't get to choose when crises happen. What it can choose is how prepared it is when they do. With the improvement from point 1 and to point 5, I think it is can build the robust system to us. And right now, the honest answer is that the country's social protection system isn't built for speed. When a crisis hits, the people at the bottom of the income ladder feel it first and hardest, and a system that takes months to respond is, in practical terms, a system that fails them. So we need to improve this. So yeah, like I said before, from my proposal improvement for point 1 and point 5, it is needed to faster respond to the economic shock, like the emergency transfer mechanism, flexible budgeting, and also the real-time data integration. This component will build the resilient social protection. We can benchmark the Philippines for this. They're so responsive system. So they developing this system that can be switched on relatively quickly when a crisis, whether economic or natural, demands it. It's not a perfect model, but it proves the concept works. For Indonesia, this isn't a luxury, it is a necessity. In a world of growing, a social protection system that can only function in stable condition isn't really protection at all. To right, this kind of adaptive mechanism don't just help vulnerable households survive a crisis, they help stabilize the broader economy at exactly the moment it needs it most. So the impact will be stronger automatic stabilizer. So its impact also to the poverty reduction, better crisis response, and also the protect of vulnerable households. Okay, I think that's all. It is the reference that I use to uh, analyze about the social safety nets and the poverty reduction in Indonesia under the Prabowo administration. Thank you.